Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Civil War Regiments Podcast. My name is Stephen, and thank you for joining in. And I have a special guest today. I have Jared Frederick of Real History joining me today. And it's a pleasure to have this opportunity. And I'm a fan of Real History. I enjoy all the movie reviews, and that's what I look forward to now when a new historical epic comes out. I'm like, what's Real History going to say? So... and I know many of our listeners are probably also enjoying that same project, as well as the many books that Jared puts out. So, Jared, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I know you're perpetually busy as well, traveling on the road. Like if you follow Jared on social media, he's going to all these places, not just American history, but World War II history and worldwide history, all these locations. So it's amazing. But I always have to ask, where did you find that fire and that interest in history? Where did it all begin for you, Jared?
I've always had an appreciation for vintage things, and some of my earliest interactions that I can recall with history have to do with a Scholastic book order that I received in kindergarten. And the first two history books that I ever bought were Pictorial Biographies of George Washington and Martin Luther King Jr., and I still have both of those books still. That blossomed into an interest in the Civil War, because just a year or two after that, I saw the movie Gettysburg for the first time, and viewers of my channel should not be surprised that that became a foundational moment for both my love of movies and American history. So that was very much the beginning in earnest, and it may seem an anomaly that a 7-year-old could sit through a 4-hour movie. It seems even more unusual by today's standards and the lack of attention spans that we humans seem to increasingly have. But in any case, I was drawn in by the magnitude of that movie, the scope, the scale, the number of people. I don't think I'd ever seen a movie quite like it before. And when I visited the battleground just about a year after that, I was able to connect what I saw on the screen with what I was seeing in person. And that was made all the easier by the fact that much of the movie was filmed in the actual location. And so that was a hinge moment of my life, and it may seem trite or trivial to some to say, oh, that a movie set you on your life's career, but I very much think that was the case in that regard. And by the time I was in 4th or 5th grade, I knew that I wanted to be a historian for my vocation.
Amazing. And, I know for you, that must have been a full circle moment when you get to be featured on TCM to introduce Gettysburg on Turner Classic Movies. That's pretty incredible. Wow.
That was a wild and strange series of events, something that I had not anticipated. In November of 2018, the channel announced a contest where it was going to pick 25 guest programmers to pick 25 movies to celebrate 25 years of Turner Classic Movies. And I thought, well... TCM has shown Gettysburg once before. It showed it during the 150th anniversary during the Civil War during a summer-long movie festival, which was really cool. And so I thought, I knew that they had it in their film library, and I thought my chances were even bettered by the fact that Ted Turner, the creator of Turner Classic Movies, also produced the movie Gettysburg. And I thought, oh, I can kill two birds with one stone here and possibly use that to hedge my way in. And so it worked. And I got to share my love of the movie with probably hundreds of thousands of people when it aired on television.
Wow. And what a real treat for you. And a treat for us viewers is that you're probably riding on that opportunity, create what you call now a real history, in this project. And I enjoy it. There's your newest episodes I'm not caught up yet because I haven't watched Masters of the Air yet. I'm behind. So I'm saving those for when I start watching it. But I appreciate especially the old classics. Like one of my personal faves growing up was Audie Murphy's Red Badge of Courage.
Mm-hmm.
So your deep dive episode into that fascinated me. I loved hearing all the facts that you had assembled for that. But tell me then, how did real history begin for you? How did you just lead that continued interest to blend into histories and movies together? And how do you go about selecting the movies that you want to select on that show?
Great questions. The channel's genesis is really rooted in an idea that my friend and now producer and co-editor Andrew Collins had. I would often go visit the home of he and his wife, and we were all history buffs, and we would inevitably watch historical films, and I would inevitably deliver color commentary on them, pointing out what they had gotten right or wrong. And eventually, Andy came up with this idea: why don't we just put a camera in front of you as you're giving color commentary while watching historical films? And at first I was like, I don't know. I mean, that seems kind of silly. But then the pandemic happened, and we were both looking for something to do and looking for some form of social or digital engagement. And he said, let's give it a try. And so it started as a pandemic project. And a few months in, our videos really started to take off, especially in regard to our treatment of Band of Brothers, which has had an incredible shelf life. And so we have about 75,000 subscribers now, and we have a huge backlog of material that we haven't even put out yet. And so it's one continuous adventure after another. As you very well know, the adventures of doing digital history always have a curveball.
And, it's a good problem to have when you have a pile of work, right? Like, you're never going to run out of movies to talk about, maybe. Right?
We will never have a shortage of historical films. But to answer your other question on that point, how we pick them, more recently, we've really tried to stick to more contemporary historical films because those are the ones that generate the most interest, and those are the ones that people are most immediately curious about. And after a really long dry spell, Hollywood is starting to rediscover the magic of the historical epic. We see that through Oppenheimer, Napoleon, Killers of the Flower Moon, Masters of the Air. We're kind of going through this great revival of historical epics that I never thought we would ever see again. But I think people are finally getting tired of superhero movies, and studios are realizing that, well, those rake in a lot of money, but they aren't perhaps prestigious. And so I think it opens up all sorts of opportunities for conversation, and we're trying to facilitate a lot of those conversations on real history.
I think there's something to that, too, where you could almost say there's a lack of creativity in modern cinema sometimes, where people are running out of just new ideas. And, I think about, like, the first time somebody had a Star Wars idea, like, it changed cinema. But when you look at American history is full of so many compelling stories of real human beings that are movie worthy. And yet to be made, right? And so I think sometimes people go back and look and like, wow, has anyone ever done a movie about this president, or has anyone ever done a movie about this romantic historical story? And so it's and another thing I do like that you do is not only are you covering these historical epics, but you're also covering like other genres, whether it's a horror movie that might have historical background to it, which that's, again, you're keeping with the times, keeping up to date what people are watching. And I think that's an added bonus in a way. That's good.
We always like to think outside the box because, a lot of people might not think of Forrest Gump as a historical movie, or The Witch, which came out a few years ago, which I really enjoyed. A good snapshot of colonial America and the paranoia therein. But yeah, we sort of ride with the times, and we try to keep a a pulse on popular culture in that regard. So, yeah, that's what we're up to.
Awesome. And also among your many professions here, not only are you YouTubing about movies, but you are yourself a history professor with Penn State Altoona. Is that right? Altoona.
Correct.
And then you also served as a park ranger at Gettysburg National Military Park. And so I'd like to ask, especially in your park ranger days, do you have one or two moments where everyone does, it seems, where did you have one particular moment where you were asked something totally off the wall, ridiculous, didn't know, like an awkward moment like that? And two, did you get an incredibly fascinating moment as a ranger where you either met a descendant of a Gettysburg veteran or you stumbled upon a discovery of fascination? So I'd like to hear if you have any stories like that.
There were no, and I'll preface this by saying that most people who visit Gettysburg National Military Park are very intelligent and well-equipped and relatively informed on the battle. But you have that 1 or 2% who are utterly clueless, and this is true of all forms of customer service in national parks and what have you. It's just human nature. But one time, and I wonder now if it was a prank call, but it certainly didn't seem like it in the moment. I hope to God it was, actually. We were getting ready to close the visitor center one evening, and we got a phone call, and a person wanted to know if there was a docking fee for their boat when they came and visited the park. And we're like, well, what do you mean? Do you have it hitched on a trailer or what? And he says, no, I want to dock my boat at the park. And we're like, well, there is no place to dock the boat at the park. And he said, I've been reading all about this high water mark. What, you mean there's no place to dock the boat? So we had to explain to this gentleman that it was a figurative high water mark, a symbolic high water mark. It wasn't a literal high water mark. And along similar lines, when one might talk about the high water mark, an occasional visitor might ask, well, how high did the floodwaters go? So these were the strange sorts of questions that one would get. I was only asked once, the most popular of all, of course, and that is, why aren't there any bullet holes in the monuments? That one's almost become cliche.
Yeah.
And in my 5 years there, I was only asked that one once. It's not as common as what some people would think. But working at a national park, you have every encounter from the stupid to the sublime. And I encountered both in the same spot in the same week once. The Pennsylvania Monument, of course, is the tallest and the biggest and the most imposing of monuments on the Gettysburg battlefield. And one day I was roving the area, just informally talking with visitors and giving out maps and brochures and whatnot. And I noticed a young lady was sitting on the edge of the very top of the Pennsylvania Monument with her legs dangling over the end. And at first I thought, oh my God, this person's about to commit suicide. And I yelled up, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm just taking in the view. I'm like, get off the edge. You're going to fall. And so there are these moments of complete obliviousness where people just don't have any sort of sense of surrounding or safety. And Devil's Den is the most common of those, where it seems like every year now somebody falls down within the cracks and they have to bring in a hook and ladder truck to pull them out or something like that. But on the very steps of that same monument, the Pennsylvania Monument, I once had a really profound conversation with the descendants of Levi Rausch, who was a Medal of Honor recipient of the 6th Pennsylvania Reserves, who helped to clear out a log house near Devil's Den that apparently had Confederate marksmen in it. And he was one of several men who received the Medal of Honor for that action. That was an interesting conversation for me for two reasons. One is that Levi Rausch and his descendants were from the same county in Pennsylvania that I was from. And two, they had his Medal of Honor with them.
My gosh.
And they're like, would you like to see it? I was like, yes, I would like to see the Gettysburg Medal of Honor.
Oh, my gosh.
And so those were the sorts of really great interactions. And I had interactions from people all over the world, veterans and active service members from not only the U.S. military, but foreign militaries who were coming to visit the park. On even rarer occasion, I met people who were at the 1938 reunion and talked to Civil War veterans. The grandchildren of Civil War veterans.
Incredible.
One time, or at least so she claimed, the daughter of a Civil War veteran who was quite aged. And so the personal connections is really what resonate at a place like Gettysburg.
It's incredible, and I think that's another reason why human interest stories are just getting more attention now in a lot of these subjects. But like, I do have to hope that initial phone call was indeed a prank call, because that's pretty epic right there alone. But
yeah,
oh my gosh, but that's incredible about the Medal of Honor, because there was 6 guys in the 6th PA that won a Medal of Honor attacking that little. And that house, like, I don't think you could even see. Like, I always wonder what that house was and where it was, because I don't think anything exists maybe to even show where that was.
No, it was probably somewhere at that intersection where off the Wheatfield Road that turns toward Devil's Den, the opposite side of that intersection. Back in the farmhouse in that vicinity. I think it was somewhere in that neck of the woods.
Oh, yeah. Now everyone's going to go hunting around now. But no.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah. You never know what you might find. But but it's kind of like you talk about, you would have, of course, these long days, and you have crazy moments, highlight moments happening in the same week sometimes. While you were working there, did you have... in your off hours, would you still find yourself wandering the battlefield on your own, or did it become a part where you had to separate that work and project? And is there a certain part of the battlefield that you would try to, let's say, calm yourself after a long day at work and anything like that?
Simply enough, a great place where I could cool down, my colleagues could cool down, because I shared a house with some colleagues, and we lived at the Wills Farm, which is not too far away from the Eternal Peace Light Memorial. And just going and sitting on our front porch, which pointed toward the railroad cut, was very calming and therapeutic, especially when the sun went down and you would just hear the crickets. And some of my fondest memories are sitting out on that front porch during rainstorms and lightning storms, and there were no visitors out, and there's just this, I don't want to say eerie, but incredibly placid sort of silence, almost like background noise that you can play off YouTube, and so I really had to look no further than my front porch to find a good spot just to chill down after a long, hot day.
Man,
roving in the park.
That's a great opportunity to have, and I'm a living historian, and many times we get to experience the parks after hours.
Yeah,
like in between the programs, and so at one time we did a program on Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga, and it was beautiful weather, and then after hours we're just sitting there at Point Park. We have the mountain to ourselves essentially, and I was like, wow, this is this is it. This is pretty neat. And so, yeah, if you're a ranger, you get to volunteer with a park like that, you do get these opportunities like that maybe your common visitor won't always get. But
Absolutely.
wonderful. And you yourself are a living historian, and I don't know if you're still active, but you were at one point, and of course, your time as a ranger at Gettysburg, and of course, you spend so much time in other genres and history or timelines. But as a reenactor, as a park ranger, did you have any certain pet regiments, if you will, regiments or brigades that fascinated you and you seem to frequent in your own research?
Yeah, I've never officially belonged to a Civil War living history group. I've fallen in with a unit here or there over the years. My primary goal in doing living history when I was working at Gettysburg was merely to supplement my responsibilities. Try to enrich programs on occasion by dressing up in period clothing, which visitors really respond to. It's like a magnet. People are just sort of like, "Oh, what's this? Like, let's go over there." And so it's a very good icebreaker in doing so. In more recent years, I've been more formally involved in World War II living history. But to get to your question, a regiment that has long interested me, once again having to do with local connections that I have to my home area. It was a regiment that didn't even fight at Gettysburg. It was a 9-month regiment, the 125th Pennsylvania, which was a 9-month regiment. And in those 9 months, they went through Antietam, Fredericksburg, and Chancellorsville. So a bad 9 months to be in the Army of the Potomac. And they repulsed multiple assaults near the Dunker Church at Antietam. And and these are guys who are buried in my local cemeteries. And so there's a real sense of kinship to them, and I suspect that's true of a lot of your listeners and people who likewise do reenacting. You need to have some sort of intimate connection with the unit that you decide to portray in many instances. My interest as far as Gettysburg regiments really depended on the day and the tour that I was giving. If you're giving a tour on Little Round Top, you're naturally drawn to the 20th Maine, and thanks to popular culture and movies, I mean, that's what people most often want to hear about when they go
like
visit the place.
Kilrain.
Yeah, did get a question about him now and again, too. That's perhaps not quite as grievous a sin in my mind. It's a very natural inclination just to take Hollywood at face value. But a Confederate regiment that I became really interested in, for reasons that I'm still trying to explain to myself today, is the 11th Mississippi, and particularly the story of Company A, which was known as the University Grays. And maybe it was because I was college age at the time that I worked there, and I was just finishing up graduate school, that even though I'm a full-blooded Yankee, and an unapologetic unionist, I really had a connection with those guys as I started looking into their individual lives, because I thought, well, here are people who are roughly my age, and they had a level of education in 1860 America that most people did not. And so I kind of connected with them on an academic level, oddly enough. And the fact that by the time they're at Gettysburg, they've already lost over half that company, and by the time the Battle of Gettysburg has come to an end, every single young man in that company had become a casualty. And so it's one of these rare companies in the annals of the Civil War that had 100% casualties through the entirety of the conflict. I mean, how can you not get drawn into a dramatic story like that? And certainly the likes of William Faulkner did as well. Some of his characters in that novel, Absalom, are in the 11th Mississippi.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and so I was able to connect with them, and I did battle walks that followed in the footsteps of not only them, but Joe Davis's brigade. And the fact that you could talk about Pickett's charge on the far end, kind of further away from these Virginia guys who get the crux of a public focus and we think about Pickett's charge. It was really neat to look at so-called Pickett's charge from another angle, which is no less dramatic.
And their stories are worth being told too. Like I always say, every regiment at Gettysburg is worth being told about and shared.
Oh yeah,
the ones that had 5 casualties are the ones that had 500 casualties. You know, but the 11th Mississippi is one of the few A and V regiments that actually has a monument. And it's one of the newer editions. But
yes, and there's there's a degree of controversy and politicking, of course.
Yes,
behind that. I believe Senator Trent Lott from Mississippi had some sway in the Park Service back in the day, and he's one of the individuals who was able to overcome the I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, the barring of additional monuments on the battlefield. So now and again, if an entity has enough sway or money or political pull, sometimes you can still sneak one in. And the monument to the 11th Mississippi, which is mostly hidden in front of the stone wall there by the Abraham Bryan farm. Most people don't even notice it as they drive by. But it's the Confederate monument of farthest advance, if you know where to look for it.
Yes. Wow. And I've also been to Fredericksburg, where I saw the Andrew Humphreys Monument, which the 125th PA was part of that. I guess that whole division was made up of 9-month regiments, and that was probably their biggest moment, if you will, as far as their campaigns go. I mean, that's a trilogy of big campaigns there. But why is it that it seems like the 3 months, 9 months, or like even the heavies out of Washington, D.C., all the guys who had the short amount of time get beat up the most in that short amount of time, it seems.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because my latest book is entitled Into the Cold Blue, and I helped a World War II pilot write his memoirs. And he flew a B-24, and he flew 34 combat missions, 34 bombing missions for the most part, in 4 months. And he told me something very revealing as I was interviewing him, because he was very well read on military history in his retirement years. And he said, I came to the conclusion that my B-24 bomber endured the same sort of tactics that our Civil War ancestors did. We bunched up in these big formations, and we went straight at the enemy with absolutely no cover. And for these short-term units, if you want to call them that, they seem to bear the brunt of a lot of the damage. So going through the ringer in a relatively short amount of time, it's an unusual commonality between Civil War and World War II veterans.
Wow, like I would never have imagined, that reference like that, a World War II pilot comparing aerial warfare like that to Civil War land battles.
Yeah.
That's something.
It made perfect sense to me, though, as he was describing it.
Wow, incredible. Wow. Again, I love how with history the way it is, there's always some new point that you can learn and hear from.
Yeah.
Wow, so that's incredible. But yeah, wow, that's something. So leading into my next question, we all talk about this, and I've asked a lot of my guests on shows, like we all have our wish list of, yes, Hollywood is recreating all these historical epics now and biographies and all these things, giving us hope that maybe there will be a movie about some of these topics that we like. And so do you personally have, if you could be in charge of a project too, like, is there a particular event from the Civil War that you would like to see recreated in a movie, or for that matter, if a Band of Brothers like miniseries came out on a Civil War regiment, is there a particular regiment that you think would fit that mold?
Yeah. Well, the 125th Pennsylvania, of course,
there you go.
my boys. But no, we all have our favorites. But no, I had some really great conversations on this very point when I worked at Gettysburg. And the best of all were my conversations with my former boss, D. Scott Hartwig, who is certainly well known in the Civil War community. And Scott is a huge fan of the Iron Brigade, and specifically Rufus Dawes. Rufus Dawes is his boy. And I don't blame him at all. It's he's a great character from the Civil War era. And Scott actually wrote kind of a treatment or an outline of what an Iron Brigade miniseries would look like.
Wow. Okay.
And he was like, an episode on training and, all of their battles. And then you have a prisoner of war episode because some of these guys are captured. And looking back on those conversations, it's like, wow, that is a lot like Band of Brothers or Masters of the Air, that sort of formula. And so, and they were everywhere in every major battle, it seemed, in the first half of the Civil War in the Eastern Theater. And I think, given the amount of carnage and drama that brigade endured, it's a ready-made miniseries, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. And I know, for instance, it seems like the Iron Brigade can get a lot of heat nowadays from just within the history community because, like the 20th Maine, like you hear about them all the time. But it would sell tickets, especially among the history community. I would go see an Iron Brigade miniseries.
Yeah, and they have the cool hats and
the cool hats.
The frock coats.
That was my favorite part of the Gettysburg movie when I first saw it. I was like, I want to see the Iron Brigade scene.
Oh yeah, no, and it has the best song from the soundtrack overlapping with it too, that everyone hits on repeat.
Yeah, I same here. I had scratch marks on my CD soundtrack. Oh, because I would keep rewinding. Wow.
Yeah.
It's like we all have the same interests at the heart of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would definitely say the Iron Brigade. And to go back to the classics as well. We've seen a lot of literary classics being adapted into movies lately. All Quiet on the Western Front being among them. I think it would be great to have a Red Badge of Courage adaptation.
Oh yeah.
Because there's so much that you could do with that. So I think...
No, I agree. And that leads to one of my favorite episodes that you had there where you kind of talked about how they chopped up that movie so bad, the one in the 50s, the original, and all that missing footage I may never see the light of day. And so when you look at it now, the way movies are now, we could have a full uncensored version of the Red Badge of Courage in its entirety, recreated and portrayed. And that would be something. I agree. That would be a good one.
Yeah.
But I'd like to ask you this too, because again, from your experiences at Gettysburg, if you could go back in time and could witness one part of the Battle of Gettysburg, what would you want to see? And do you have that in your mind, like one moment that you'd like to go back and witness?
Well, what I have. The scientific question I have is, do I have the possibility of being shot? Or am I just some sort of omniscient spirit that is immune to shrapnel and whatnot?
Yeah, just be the spirit.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I would actually go to the battle's aftermath, and I would see the Gettysburg Address. To hear Lincoln's voice. We all we all have
Yeah.
a sense of what we think Lincoln sounded like. And of course, Daniel Day-Lewis did a pretty good job in that regard. But to be able to hear him speak, and to see how the audience reacted to the Gettysburg Address, I think would be an incredible moment.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. You cheated there. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's good. I mean, I'd love to hear the voices of all these big figures, right?
Yeah.
All Lee and Meade. Like, I'd love to hear what did Meade sound like at that Council of War? What did Sickles sound like? Like there's so many fascinations, and I repeat this frequently on the show, but like. A lot of people say, when I ask this question, a lot of people say, like, the high watermark, for example, they would want to see that, or Pickett's charge coming across the field. But me personally, I don't know why every time I study Gettysburg, the one moment that I want to see is, again, as a spirit, I would be in downtown Gettysburg on top of maybe the Fonistock building or somewhere, seeing the retreat happen on the first day. Just seeing absolute chaos, seeing civilians running around, seeing the 11th Corps coming from one direction, seeing the 1st Corps coming from the other, seeing Ewell's Corps driving in. Like, to see that other packed streets and chaos, I don't know why, but that sticks out to me.
It's I've always thought it's like the running of the bulls on steroids.
Yes.
Like, picture that sort of speed and intensity and angst.
Yeah.
And put ammunition in it in the equation, and that's probably something like what you have.
I like one of my favorite is the Don Triani painting of the moment when Hancock comes on Cemetery Hill and he's calming the troops, and you see this like mob of men from all corps mixed up behind him.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
One of them, there's Zhuov wiping his brow.
Yes,
I remember.
Yeah. Brooklyn, 14th Brooklyn, probably. Yeah,
a very very good Troyani touch.
Yes, as always, and I'm always trying to look for those in my collection too. Hard to come by. But as we wind down, Jared, do you have some parting words, comments for what you want people to get out of visiting Gettysburg or any battlefield for that matter? Someone that's either not like us, hasn't been impassioned by history their whole lives, but what do you want people to take away from these historic sites?
First and foremost, the urgent need to save them while we still can. I think everybody who is a history buff can agree upon that. I would also encourage people to take a more complex and sometimes nuanced view of the American Civil War and all of its political and racial messiness, and how that still affects us today. And additionally, too, additional food for thought as we contemplate our own times in eras of extreme divisiveness, is to reflect upon the Civil War and how awful a time period it was, and to strive to never allow something like that to ever happen again. And I think those are some of the biggest takeaways that we can learn from the deadliest war in American history.
Amen. And that's why we keep going back to it and studying it, because something like this is just, it's so overwhelming to comprehend that we even were capable of doing what we did so long ago. And so that is a good reminder. Keep that in mind, everybody. And as we close here, Jared, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciated this conversation and getting a more like a personal answers from you. And but where can people go to watch your videos, to buy your books, to follow you on social media? I'll let you have the floor for that.
Sure. The main hub where you can find all of that, whether you want to follow me on YouTube or Facebook, is to go to my website, jaredfrederick.com. My YouTube channel is Real History, and that's REEL, as in a film reel. And we analyze history versus Hollywood. And we have some really great conversations and discoveries along the way. And if you're listening to this podcast, I'll but guarantee that you will enjoy Real History as well.
Awesome. Please check it out, everybody. You won't be disappointed. It's a real treat. And so thank you, Jared. I'll be sure to have all that linked in the show notes for all you listeners. And so no worries there. And thank you again for your time. I look forward to all of your new content you're putting out and your next books that you put out. And so, and then maybe down the road, you'll have some more regimental histories or something coming.
I definitely want to. I've been heavy on writing the World War II stories over the past few years. I would definitely like to return to the Civil War at some point. So stay tuned.
Excellent. Well, thank everyone. Thank you all for listening. Thank you again, Jared, for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.